Dr. Jazz.
Thanks for taking the time, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I've talked to basically so many people you've played with, part of the Chicago improvised scene. So I was like going through my albums. I was like, yes. And you have a new album out, so it's kind of
Yes.
kind of makes sense. So but I'll just jump in, man. Uh, I listened to the new one, Four Spheres, and it's amazing. Like already it starts like with this angular or something going on. And I wanted to ask you about especially your writing process. I mean, I love the early octet stuff and everything you did. Like you're such a great composer, and especially for the new one, for the quartet. How did you start writing, or in general, what's your process when you compose music? I mean,
Well, usually I'm trying to solve some kind of problem, I guess, or some sort of, or propose something new that does. I mean, it's always like, I guess, supplemental to free improvising. That's my zero. My base is free improvising, and I guess when I'm doing the compositions, I guess I'm trying to solve some kind of problem or propose some new way to interact as improvisers, or like we were talking about the octet thing, it was something, it's a sort of response to something else that's going on. And I thought, like, well, I mean, I guess I felt like I was going to a lot of gigs where there was not a lot of in some ways the Chicago scene is, a lot of my colleagues, is sort of rejection of harmony.
Yeah,
in a way.
Yeah.
But it's not just, that's the result of, I think it's not a conscious, like, we don't want to deal with this, but what we do want to deal with is melody and lines. And so I thought, well, I think it's maybe is an interesting thing for me to propose some, like a really the thing that's like explicitly about harmony.
When you mentioned problem, like what sort of a problem? Let's say that problem you want to solve, like.
Yeah, so the I guess the problem is this new quartet CD is I guess the problem was trying to figure out how to get improvisers to stop.
Okay.
Because I feel I was in a lot of as a bass player, especially with like really dense free jazz or something like that, it becomes there's a question of like, why am I here? What am I doing? How does this matter what I'm doing? And what I figured out is that what I could figure out how to like really affect the situation was to stop. And it almost didn't matter what I did, but the starting and the stopping could be a structural element in the music. And I think that, and then that became interesting to me. And but because if you think about like in a jazz context, it's a disaster, it's catastrophic if the bass player stops.
Sure.
Right. And so to think about, I mean, that's a lot of power that you have.
Yeah.
And to affect things. And so and I guess when I came to this thing, it was more about like, I guess I thought of the compositions more like like an image, like that, in that sense of the word composition. So like it's more about the big details, or not the big detail, the big structures, like starting and stopping. That's I guess I was thinking about like the advantage there's advantages and disadvantages for free improvising, and just in terms of, if you think about it as a technology. And so there's some advantages are the details, like the really detailed things, you as a composer, you don't have to deal with, because it's actually better to assemble musicians and let them fill in the details of exactly what to do. That to me is interesting, because see some of these, like, really the contemporary classical music compositions, and then the score just looks insane, right? Just for like 5 seconds of music, there's like so much information that they feel they need to communicate, that the composer feels they need to communicate. And I feel like that's like for me, that's like a breakdown in the technology of the notation. First of all, the notation is not suited. It's not working for what you want to do, right? It's like when you're doing the whatever, the harmonic analysis in college or something. As soon as it like modulates and you didn't catch it, and it starts to be like, okay, this is the 6 of 2 in the 5 of, it starts to get off. It's like, wait a second, I should back up. That's just one of the new key.
Exactly.
Right? And so it's like when the way to communicate what's happening or what should happen gets too complicated, I feel like it's a breakdown in there's a gap between the notation and what you want to do with it. And so for me, the big details of these new compositions it really has to do with like composing the big time structures, and then also how to interact with each other, and just proposing ways, basically a different way to improvise in the so-called free improvisation.
That makes sense what you said. I mean, I've heard so many free jazz concerts, or whatever you want to improvise, let's call it, by incredible musicians, which were like, because there was no structure in a sense. I mean, so I know I get the sense, like, this structured improvisation, like, I love that it's like within a context. It makes more like an art, it's more of a story, maybe. That's
no, I think it's true. It's as I get older and thinking about how to make music, it's to me that I need to go from the place of saying no to almost everything, and not just everything is possible. I'm going to say yes to this, this, and this. It's too much to say yes to, but I can say no to almost everything, and then this is what I'm left with. And I think that's a more, as a free improviser, of course, there's so much in terms of like how to learn to do it, and how to like how people make their journey in that, as musicians, it tends to be really emphasizing on what should I do, what are all the different things that I can do, and not what do you say no to, and what do you reject. Again, what things are you rejecting? And that thing, I think that there's a place for both of those things, but there's nobody talks about saying no to things. They say a lot about yes to things. And so I think that's a way, also there's a way of that sometimes improvisers can mask their lack of skill as musicians by just cycling through new material, and like not saying no to things, just keep saying yes to this stream of consciousness music. And there's some of that stream of consciousness music that I love. But there's it's a sort of like, it ends up being hard to make one piece different from another piece.
True.
And so that's those newer pieces on the new CD, I think it's related to that. It's related to saying no to a bunch of stuff and just sort of narrowing it down.
How did you communicate that to the musicians? I mean, like how does a score of Four Spears, the first tune, look like? I mean, what's written and what's not there?
So it's not written like in well, there is some conventional notation, but it's more of a way that the piece that, how do I say it? They're graphic scores, but all the they're not I've played a lot of graphic scores and seen a lot of graphic scores that don't mean anything, or they mean everything. You know, and I have students, and I always tell them that everything is nothing, and that's true. I think.
Yeah, sure.
And so these graphics, it's more about like, in a way, it's yeah. So that, I don't know what the first piece has to do with. I don't know. It's more of a way to go from one thing to another thing.
Okay.
And there's certain things that we can do, and it's hard to just explain in language this image.
Sure.
But I guess it's not like a thing that reads, you know, from left to right, like a book, and we do this, then do that, then do this. It's sort of, here's some choices.
No, I'm asking because it sounds like almost composed yet also improvised at the same time. You know, it sounds very composed in the beginning. Yet there's like a thin blurred line. What is improvised or what is composed? I was like, shit, what's happening there? You know, is this written out, or are you guys playing with this one motive and just? I mean, I really like it. It's great.
Oh, great. Well, I guess I wasn't necessarily going for this blurring the composition and improvisation, which, you know, it can't not do that. I mean, there's like so many, you know, the number one, well, as a bass player, the number one question you get is what kind of strings do you use? But the number two, a distant second, is how much of that was composed and how much was improvised. And well, I mean, it's a sort of, of course, you understand what they're asking you. I do understand that, but I think it's valuable to like question the premise of the inquiry, like, because you can't, not even as an improviser, as a free improviser, you're always making choices, and things are being composed in that way, of that there's like a photograph, you're composing time, you're composing relationships between everything. That's so I guess I wasn't like trying to like make this you know, and usually what it means is like, how much are people playing in the ensemble or unison, or playing, you know, making some kind of part together. And yeah, I guess I wanted it to sound, I don't know, I guess I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted it to sound like. I guess I was thinking about like like an experiment, like actually experimental in the sense that I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And there's always places in the piece, in each of the, you know, compositions, where it's like, do what you want. It's, you know, there is, you know, and then, but it's not like we're always, it's a little bit like, you know, I don't know, like you know, there are plenty of classical pieces that everybody has a different part, and there's not really a score. Because in mine, there's not really, everybody has a part that's a little bit different, but there's not really a score. You can't really write a score to these things, and it's more of, you know, I guess the relationships are a little bit complicated, but it's because it relates to, you know, certain instruments or musicians are coordinated at some times, and that at other times they're coordinated with somebody else. But it's not really a game or anything like that. I'm trying to keep the actual kind of rules or the composition to be really simple, so that we can still throw it away. Throw it away at some level. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I love it. It's a really nice album. And
thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. But I wanted to ask you, like, also, you said you've worked. I mean, obviously, as a band leader, you've done so much stuff, and you've been on the scene for such a long time. But I wanted to go a little bit back. I don't know, mid '80s, I guess. What was the player, or did you have like a certain moment that got you excited for this music? I mean, like improvised music or jazz music in special, especially.
In the mid '80s, like when I was in
I,
junior
I don't know
high.
when was that moment that, or was it early '80s? I don't know, like or
No,
late
no,
'80s.
I mean, I guess, that was, yeah, really, I didn't start playing an instrument, I don't think, until probably I don't know, it was probably like 89.
Oh wow, okay,
Is that true?
wow, okay.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it was. I was probably 14. So yeah, I guess that was mid 80s. And I almost immediately, I don't know, I think I just played because I had always wanted to play music, but it was like, you know, where I grew up, it was the, countryside, and it's not like instruments just laying around to be, uh and there was, so I just I think there was people that I knew, a friend that I knew that had a guitar and brought it to school one day.
Mm.
And like after school, there was another kid who played drums, and and they played. And I think I asked if I could rent a bass,
Oh,
an
okay.
electric bass. And I had to rent the bass.
Wow.
Um, and I had a job, like a little like after school job, and so I had some money that I could do it myself, basically. And then but it was almost immediately I went to like a summer camp, like a jazz summer camp at the school where I went to, and uh there was like some listening time, and I heard like the Charlie Parker, and I was just like, wow, this is
Oh,
crazy.
okay.
And that's like, it was like, okay, I don't know, for some reason it connected with me as like a little kid, like basically metalhead kid, um but it was, also like it was countryside, so there was a record store like in a couple towns over. And I you know the jazz section, they didn't have like the most extensive jazz section. I probably, the people who were buying for that record store didn't have the greatest like
Sure.
knowledge of things. So I think one of the first CDs I got was like these like Charlie Parker bootleg recordings. And it was just like, I loved it, but it was like, man, the recording devices back then
Yeah,
were terrible, but it was like, it wasn't even a real record, it was like a bootleg, basically. It wasn't, it was something like those Dean Benedetti, wire
yeah,
recordings, something like that. It was quite poor, and for some reason that was like the first thing. I mean, maybe that was probably I think that the reason why I bought it is because I had maybe a book from school that had like the lead sheets, and like I recognized the name of all these songs.
yeah.
Whereas maybe like the other CDs, maybe there were like songs that weren't in that book or something. But I was like, okay, yeah, I have the sheet music to Ornithology, I have the sheet music to this one, so I'm gonna get this one. I didn't know anything about it, but it was valuable enough for me. And of course, like Ornithology, it's just like I'm reading along with it, and then like, wait, what's this? Like the bridge is always, there's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
so many
exactly.
different
Yeah.
bridges to that song. And I was like, I guess I don't know how to read music, because this doesn't work. Whatever that's written here is not this. So that, yeah, I mean, that was sort of my in to jazz music.
Parker. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a good start. Did you then what about bass players? I mean, did you then investigate the bass scene also? I mean, like, or how did that begin?
I mean, I have to say, I have never been the person who is like really crazy about the bass necessarily.
Okay.
Um, just because, I mean, also I didn't really have people to play with as a high school, like as a kid. Like there weren't really other people who were like, who liked jazz and like wanted to play or anything like that. So I didn't really play with other people until I got to college, I guess.
Mm.
And so I was just like sort of like the bass. I just had this bass and I played the bass, but I didn't really identify as like, because there was nobody else. There wasn't like, oh, you play the trumpet, you play the set, you play drums. Like I don't know. I just played this. This is the instrument that I have, and I like music. And so I guess in terms of bass players, what I got, yeah, I mean, I think that was more like, I think after a couple of years of college, I could play the double bass like well enough to like to play with other people.
Mm.
And maybe that, and at that time, then I was like starting to check out other bass players.
Mm.
But in terms of my favorites, is definitely Richard Davis is probably number one.
Oh.
And there was some, and of course in school you're always playing those Thad Jones, Mel Lewis things if you're if you're lucky, and just if I feel like there's probably so many students who actually never check out those recordings, and the way that Richard plays on those records is completely unhinged. I mean, it's just insane. And I think that really drew me. It was like, whoa, you like this is, and I think that's still with me, or it's connected with this idea that of like when things don't match, it's really exciting. Because those early Thad Jones, Mel Lewis thing is like the same. It's like he there was that movie that came out a couple of years ago. The guy, is it Green Book, about the pianist?
Oh yeah, sure.
And there's like a billion records of of that pianist with Richard Davis. That was the band. This was like before. This is like in the early '60s, I think. And then it's like around 1963. Then Richard is everywhere. He's on like 10 billion records. Right. And so it's like, Booker Ervin, or where like all of that, sort of out jazz.
Yeah.
Like sort of out hard bop stuff, and the Dolphy and all of that.
Stuff,
and it's
sure.
he's playing in the same way essentially with Mel Lewis. And it's just so exciting to see that sometimes they hook up and sometimes they don't. And it was so exciting to me to hear someone play in that way, just like so like sort of asserting as a bass player to say, I'm part of this whole thing. To me, like the famous person to do that is Scott LaFaro, but to me, Scott LaFaro, that thing is more technical and more show-offy. And this, I feel like Richard, it's more of in service of
supportive
of the music. It's like, no, I'm just like I'm duking it out with everybody. And then when it's time for me to pull back, I'm just going to pull back. And because it's, again, everything is nothing. So like that's the whole thing of that, asserting yourself in the music and then pulling back and be supportive. I think that's so exciting about those records.
No, it's great that you mentioned him. I mean, I think he's still quite underrated in the wider realm of jazz, in a sense,
Yeah.
I mean, musicians know him, I hope, I guess. Maybe we know him, I don't know, but like everyone talks about Jimmy Garrison and the guys, but like he's still, I think, quite under the radar but such a monster player. I mean, like on some, like you said, of the best records from mid-60s on, I guess, but even earlier actually. But Jason, I wanted to ask you, I've read you also got a chance, you mentioned you went to college, that how did you hook up with Roscoe Mitchell? Because I think he must have been such an integral part of your studies, like or what was the story with him?
I just after I finished with school, I just I was just looking for something to do in terms of like, I have been some person who has never had the I just didn't have like an in to go to New York. in terms of like, there was no way for me to like, I just, I'm from really countryside place, and I just didn't have the courage to just like show up in New York. It's really, I didn't know I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anybody there. I didn't know anybody who went there. I didn't know anything about it. But so Roscoe lived, I mean, he's lived off and on in Madison, Wisconsin, which is where I worked with him, which is a 2-hour drive for where I grew up. And so I was just like, okay, let me try this as an interim, sort of like, as jazz musicians, and especially as in America, as white jazz musicians, we, there's something about like, there's this, always you're looking for authenticity or sort of some kind of to attach yourself or to get a little piece of, I don't know if authenticity is the right word.
But I know what you mean, like of those who kind of invented, in a sense, this thing also.
Yeah,
guess,
maybe. So some legitimacy, or like just just to it's like going to some place and they you like rub the feet of some statue and
going
or
to
something
the
source, like that.
Right?
Yeah. So you're like going to going to the source, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, okay, let me try to get some knowledge or get something from this person. I mean, it seems, now that I say it out loud, it seems like really wrong in some way. I'm just like, give me something, right? But I mean, in the end, I think it was great, because I mean, even before I finished school, I took some lessons with him. And I think that he could tell that I was just genuinely like a fan and wanted to learn something. And then when I moved to closer to him, then I ended up becoming like a copyist for him, because he didn't use Finale at that time. He does now. But so he was writing things, and he had a bunch of big projects at that time, and he was writing everything by hand on scores. And then at a certain point, he really liked to play these like Salamon sonatas, like on flute. He was interested in, he played flute and recorder and stuff, still does, I believe. And I think that the magic was that I played the bass, and there's two parts in those things. There's the bass and and the flute part. And so it was like perfect. So maybe that was actually the exchange, is like, okay, let's agree, you come over and you play the bass so I can practice these Baroque sonatas, and then I'll give you a little bit of knowledge every once in a while.
That's quite cool. Yeah.
So it was mostly that, but then it became making sense at a certain point, where I would basically go to his house and work in the basement on his computer on those scores, putting them onto Finale, because he would want to edit them all the time. Like, and he would be, okay, put these two measures in the middle here. And it sometimes would be, of course, really complicated scores. And he'd be like, okay, so this, starting on beat 3 of this measure, you're going to insert this. And then, and so it'd be like, okay, how do I do that on the computer? Sure. And so I think that's why I write everything by hand now. I'm just like, I've had enough experience with that. I don't want to deal with it ever again. But that was mostly our relationship was more like that. As I kind of worked for him. I didn't really. I played with him a couple of times, but not really. There was 1 or 2 gigs probably.
But still, it's a good exposure. I mean, it's you couldn't start better already by copying the scores. You get, I think it's quite a. Yeah, I mean, it's there. It's like one of the masters, right? I mean, that's not much to say, actually. I mean, yeah. So, yeah. Well, you mentioned New York, like, but how did you then decide to move to Chicago? What was the main trigger for that? Did you already know some people, or like you just said, okay, shit, I want to enter that
Yeah.
scene? Or
Well, I guess it was, once so then after my experience with Roscoe, I ended up doing the master's degree in Michigan. And so I knew some people from school that were from Chicago. And so after we graduated, I knew a bunch of people here. And I had played a couple of gigs with Michael Zarang.
Oh, okay. Really?
When I was in school still. And yeah, I guess it was mostly people, my classmates from school that were moving here. And so and it was also, again, sort of, I mean, I had never spent any time here before that, but it was familiar at least, and I knew people who I could stay at somebody's apartment for a couple of days and so on and so forth. So I had some familiar like that, but really that's how it happened. Is just because I already knew people here.
Was it hard for you when you came to Chicago? I mean, who were? I mean, obviously, I'm quite a huge record collector, so I have you on so many records, and kind of, the same names keep repeating, like that you made really huge connections, with Tim Daisy and Aram and Matt Botter and all these, Dave Rempis. I mean, all these incredible guys. Like, but what were the first? I mean, these were obviously the first connections you made in Chicago. Or like, what were the first gigs you got? Like, how did you enter the scene? I'll put it like that. I mean.
Yeah, I think the first gigs that I had was there was a guy named Eric Roth, who I was a classmate at Michigan, and he invited Dave to play, and so the three of us played. I think that was definitely the first. So Eric, I mean, Eric is an interesting guy. He doesn't really play drums anymore, as far as I know, but he's a really successful as a conductor of like the music for video games.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so he's like going all around and like playing the these video game scores, and I see him all all over the world.
It's quite cool. Wow.
And so but I guess through Dave, then I met a bunch of people, and yeah, Aram was on one of the first gigs that I played in Chicago. It was there was just it at the time the community was really big.
Yeah.
Or it was well, I wouldn't say it's actually not, probably bigger now, but at that time, at least there was a bunch of people, and I was just in Berlin, just trying to meet people and hang out at the end of the summer, and there's just like so much going on there, and and it reminded me of Chicago at that time, like around 99, 2000, of there just being like gigs everywhere. But the difference is, in Berlin, I feel like there's a ton of musicians. In Chicago, there wasn't that many musicians. We were just playing everywhere. Like we would play in the basement of some place, and or play in some bar that you convince somebody. And I remember playing at this bar a couple of times, and then like the owner of the bar didn't know that we were playing there, and they found out, and they were like, "You can't play here anymore." But so there was there was a lot of stuff going on. There was just like a lot of activity, and yeah, I mean it was just like a lot of people just wanted to be creative and do stuff. And so it was really easy to to find people that you like playing with, and that were just curious about investigating music.
Because you still kind of I talked with Tim and Dave and Jeb Bishop and Michael Zarank and all these guys, and Mars Williams, kind of mid-90s, that there was this like revival through John Carbett also, like and Ken, of the Chicago improvised music scene, I think, and I guess there was still it was still going on when you came to Chicago, right? I mean, you caught that wave in a
Yeah, I
sense,
think
or
it was at the very end.
right? Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, there was that the period before I moved here. I don't really know about it. So I only sort of know the yeah, I mean I don't know anything about it basically.
yeah.
So but that's but it was interesting at least when I arrived there was an interesting because there's a sort of a little bit, even though even Ken Vandermark is not that older than me.
Yeah.
I don't know how he is older, but I don't think it's very much. It's not
No,
like,
it's like
he's
yeah,
not like, I think it's less than 10 years.
yeah,
But there was a very clear sort of generation uh, divide. Um, because, if our scene was small, I feel like theirs was even smaller because you would see, at least in my memory, it would be like I would see somehow like because there was the Vandermark Five, and then there
yeah,
was like among those five people there was like four bands.
yeah, exactly.
Right,
Yeah,
there was it's like the five, and then there was like different combinations had very distinct like and so I think that was that's why, because as for us we were just so it was so inspirational to be like, these people are going outside of they're like getting even in an airplane and going someplace and presenting their music. That's insane.
yeah,
Right, it was so cool and like inspirational.
yeah,
But they were them and we were us, and it wasn't like there wasn't nobody who was just like, well, who are these younger guys? I don't feel like there was that much curiosity about it.
yeah, yeah,
But there was, at least from us, I think eventually there was some restlessness among us, like dang, we've been at this already for a couple of years, and like there was still like kind of not any way to sort of break out of our like local little thing. I mean, it eventually happened.
sure.
But uh it's curious because that sort of 90s Chicago, and this is also this is not, I'm going to say, about 90s Chicago, 90s like white Chicago.
Yeah, let's put it
There's
like that.
this is
Yeah, yeah,
because I think that a lot of times that gets all mixed up into one, but it's actually not.
yeah,
We
it's
still
different.
live in
Yeah,
a city that is very, I mean, I don't know if segregation is the right word for it anymore, but there's different scenes, and it's not like everything is all mixed up into one, which I think is not necessarily the worst thing, because it's always that things develop and get very local, and I think that's exciting.
hmm, yeah. No, it makes sense. Sure. No, but it's true what you said. Like,
I
because
mean, which is also
yeah,
part of the point of my latest the CD, the Four Spheres CD. It's those, that's not something that we're like, oh, we just played together and then it was like great. No, I put it together. It was like all the musicians like I played with in different situations. But it's not like a natural, or that's not just like my friends. That's Chicago tends to be this goes for all Chicago. It tends to be, well, you're my friend, let's play. And right, whereas I feel like in New York there's a lot of people that I know in New York where it's like, well, I'm not really friends with that person, but they're in my band. But in
yeah,
Chicago it
interesting.
tends
Yeah,
to be really like, like I have never like had any I don't like spend any social time with Marcus Evans at all. I would love to. He's a great guy, but we don't, we don't meet for coffee or anything like
sure.
that. Um,
Interesting. Yeah.
and it's just because, yeah, he plays the drums in the way that is, I mean, I guess the thing, just to you didn't ask me about this, but I'm going to talk about Mark. I mean, the reason why Marcus is in here is
Yeah, I wanted
because
to ask you about the band. Yeah, I mean, like,
yeah, he's willing to like transgress some norms of improvised music, of jazz, but he can play jazz. I mean, I think that's really important for me, is like to, yeah, I want things to mean something on I guess multiple levels.
Yeah.
Because you listen to the music, it sounds a certain way. But that doesn't necessarily signal or signify, right? The classic jazz quartet is what I put together in terms of the instrumentation,
yeah.
right? And so that signifies something, it means something, right? I didn't have some instrument like oboe or something that
Tuba
doesn't,
or whatever. Yeah.
that doesn't signify something. I wanted to
Yeah.
signify a jazz quartet.
Hmm.
But I wanted to I didn't want it then to be like something totally different, because there's definitely a lot of jazz in there,
Definitely.
like really, like, again, like this, yeah, and not like modern, I mean really like bebop almost is the way I'm thinking of this thing. But so Marcus is willing, and he's able to play them, at a master level. But he's also willing to stop and willing to play something else, and willing to, like, yeah, there's a certain maturity about, because as improvisers, there was a certain point in my life where I was, as an improviser, where I felt like it was the most uncool thing that you could do was reveal that you could actually play your instrument.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
sure,
there's like
sure.
like where it was always, that was like the goal was like the person thinking like, can they actually play after the concert, like, and even every once in a while they were be in a some sort of like school clinic thing, and some like jazz student will be just like, well, could you guys play a blues or something, as if to like, could you prove that you can actually play? And I think it's, maybe I've come back to the middle someplace, and I think it's more interesting to sort of reveal that you can play, but you choose not to.
Sure.
I think that's more interesting than, like, because there were I mean, the thing is that there were plenty of people who, I wouldn't say that there was plenty or anyone who like couldn't play actually, or but who could sort of do this improvised music,
thing.
extended technique language on an instrument, but they couldn't actually play. I don't know. I don't remember anybody like that. But there was, for example, there was this guy, Michael Colligan, who played dry ice.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a hot plate with these like knives. They would heat up these knives, like just butter knives. But if you put it on the dry ice, it makes like a sine wave, basically. It sort of vibrates very fast. And so there was something like like that's the closest thing. Like it wasn't the an instrument that again, it was cool because you could turn it, you could make some different pitches basically, but you could sort of like make sound or not make sound.
Yeah.
So it's sort of irrelevant of the whether you could play the dry ice or not, but yeah, so that, I mean, I guess that's important to me, is like to be able to go between, just have the maturity to like stop and play something really, really simple that serves the flow of the music, or the disjunction of the music, whatever it comes to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And of course, Ed Wilkerson is somebody who is just he's a local legend, and we don't have too many of, like, in New York there's like a gazillion jazz legends who are still walking the streets, and in Chicago, also of course we have plenty of elders who are amazing musicians, but it's it's a little bit different when between people who have, who are like famous and not famous, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, Ed is somebody who I'm not sure I would say he's famous, but I think he had a huge career as a quite young person. And then there was, because it's, I don't know if you organize gigs and stuff like that, but it's kind of sucks, right? Especially compared to like as a bass player, just showing up and like playing, you don't have to, you just go to the hotel. You didn't have to decide what hotel it was.
Sure.
You didn't have to decide how to get to the hotel. And so I think that Ed was probably really pushed as a young person, and then sort of like, followed some other paths. Like he's always been playing, but it's like, you see remember he gave me this DVD of him like at the Chicago Symphony Center with this like 50-piece, like with an orchestra and band and all this, it was like incredible. Like that must have been just like an unbelievable, just, writing the proposals for all that stuff and collecting all the funding and everything. It must have, been just like a nightmare. But he did all that stuff, and then I guess I knew him when I first moved here. Definitely, he was still playing with this group called the Eight Bold Souls, and they play. And then at a certain point, he started to play with some other people that I knew, and it's because it's like, again, a social thing. Is like I didn't know him personally. And then, in Chicago, there's like no money for anything. And so at least I don't feel comfortable calling somebody for a gig that doesn't pay anything. And for a long time, I didn't have any money to like front it, or just like, because that happens too. Is it's like, well, I don't know this person, but I'll just pay you out of my pocket.
Sure.
Or something,
Sure. Yeah.
But I didn't have that. I didn't have that money. I didn't, and so, but eventually I started to, I played a gig with him in this casual sense, and kind of, it's once you kind of get to know somebody, and then also as I get a little bit older, I guess I don't have those gigs that don't pay anything, or if they do, I have the ability to like,
yeah.
I feel more comfortable like that. And that's the way. I mean, the thing about Chicago is that most of us have jobs. I think that's something different about our scene is, and it's, it's not everybody has a completely unrelated job. But
teaching gigs, right? So many of us have. I mean, like,
yeah. So it's, so, as I got older, anyways, I was able to like, sort of break the ice with Ed in some way as an elder, and also as just like somebody who is a legend. It's just so rare that we have that in Chicago, because if somebody like, there's a good million jazz musicians who are from here who are still around, but they left. Like Lee Konitz left when he was like 16 years old or something. Steve Coleman, there's a story, he got on the bus like right after his graduation ceremony from high school or something. And so people, go out and they don't really come back. And so, Ed is somebody who stuck around and who has been doing it for a long time, and it's just like sounds so great. And it's like so singular in his voice. And it's it's somebody who I again, just like Roscoe, like I wanted to be a part of that somehow. It's like in the way that I figured out to do it is like, by making this group.
Sure. Yeah. I do the same, man. I wanted to play with Bob Moses and Ariel Thunders, and I came up with a tour and we did a record, and it's like being at the university for me, like playing with all of these elders. It's just like finishing a bachelor or something after one tour. You're like, damn, okay, shit. Yeah, I love that what you did. Yeah, but now when you're talking about this record and being a band leader, you sound really like you have an idea, what you're doing. Was it like already that in the beginning? I mean, because you started leading bands quite early. I mean, you know, that rapid, what is it, rapid crochet. I love that
Yeah.
album, the trio. That's so beautiful. And like, when did you start leading bands in Chicago, and how was that like for you?
Yeah, I guess yeah, I guess I don't really, you know, as a bass player, it's really easy not to.
Yeah.
Because at least for me, like I'm a person who um yeah, I can try to find my place in somebody else's music.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess this is an interesting thing to think about, but like, you know, I have some very specific idea how I want my music to work, or how I feel at least afterwards about an improvised concert and how it went and what, you know, I have really very specific ideas. But as a bass player and like a sort of jazz bass player, like I can somehow find my way in somebody else's music, which is something that I would not make myself.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a unique thing, because I mean, I think that's a unique thing among bass players to be able to do that, because I think that um that's just so much of how as a rhythm section player you end up learning how to play music or entering music through something like that. And like through that situation, um and I guess I have before now I haven't really thought about it like that, but because there's, you know, there's definitely some people who is, you know, they have their conception of what music, what they like in music, and they can't deal with somebody else's
Sure.
tunes or their whatever. It's like, no, that's not the way I want to do it.
Yeah.
And you know, even as a, yeah, every once in a while like you get somebody, you know, who are like a hardcore, you know, improvised music person, they ask me like, how can you play with X, Y, and Z thing? And it's like, I don't know, it's fun. Play, you know, like I play bass and I can find, you know, I guess I can find my way. I mean, I guess, you know, I tend to be the person who, yeah, if it's not that band leader's thing, it lasts once, because I tend to not, you know, I tend to push things around or be a little bit more uh on maybe wild in terms of my interpretation, not necessarily being like playing a lot or being dense, but going off script. I mean, maybe treating everything like an improvised music gig.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm so okay, to get back to your question then about the opposite of like leading the band. I mean, I guess I always had some yeah, I have a drive to be in conversation with things more than just, you know, than being the bass player. So being the bass player is great when it's in the actual like performance of the thing, because like I said, you just show up and do it. And also if no one comes to the gig, I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel embarrassed. But if it's mine, with, you know, then I, you know, so there's so I always had like a little bit like I would try it because I can't not do it. I can't not try to input something into the system somehow myself. But then you know, sort of get you know, I guess my expectations of maybe what I get back have changed. And so I'm more, yeah, I guess I don't know what the word is, but I don't get too discouraged when if it doesn't go the way I expected or something like that in terms of the actual like feedback from the thing. But yeah, just having my own bands, I guess I just have some, I have a drive to contribute something to the conversation, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not really like uh yeah, I don't have anything more to say about it, I
No,
guess.
but there's also like I don't know if this is like, I've noticed like a Chicago thing. Or I mean, obviously, all of you guys are band leaders, but there are so many kind of collectives in a sense, like Tiger's Milk, and even with you, like with Fred and Nate and Paul Litton and what Josh Berman. Yeah, I mean that one. All of these are like kind of collective bands. There's so much happening. Also, in your case, you're part of so many of these groups. Like, how did these come about, or still do? I mean,
I guess there's, it comes back to Ken and John Corbett, like in the late 90s. Like this was really a destination for especially those European improvisers,
yeah,
to come and present work and to have a solid gig, because I was too young, so I don't know that. I'm not sure that there's a kind of network of presenters and venues where you can come and do a tour, which I don't think that was necessarily always the case.
mm-hmm.
But people could come to Chicago. Again, it's just like any other sort of music center. You could come here, and you still can, and happens all the time for people to come and play a bunch of gigs in one city. Right? That's not true in every place. Even
yeah.
Like big centers of music, you can't go to. I mean, I don't want to call anybody out, but like you can't go to like Athens, Greece, probably
Paris,
play
almost
10,
the same. It's like,
well, Paris, you can't even play once.
No, exactly. It's true. I mean, I've played with so many guys from Paris, like improvisers, and they don't play in Paris actually. So
yeah,
that's a different story anyway. But yeah,
this is one. There's this organization called the Bridge, and
yeah,
they come to Chicago and they
exactly.
exchange. And it was a long time I was figuring out, like, I don't understand why totally, because sometimes the musicians are a little bit. I mean, I think that's the point, but they're like not exactly like completely simpatico with each other. And so I'm not really sure what this is happening. And when I went to Paris and I understood, it's like, it's such a novelty to be able to go to some place and play, like, I mean, sometimes they play like 20 gigs or something in Chicago.
Yeah,
over the course of like a week and a half or 2 weeks or something. And in Paris, like, yeah, it would be rare to play one or two.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I think to go and just be part of the big community. And so anyways, how those collectives come together is because there were so many European musicians who would come to Chicago, and yeah, even I think they didn't even really tour around. They just came to Chicago, and then they played a bunch of gigs and went back. And because there was just like so many things that you could do, and especially at that time, there could be, I think this is still true to a certain extent, but there is an audience.
Yeah.
So like you can go, I remember going to this thing, and it was even so extreme. It was like, I think it was Paul Litton, Paul Lovin's duo.
Whoa, man. Okay.
At this rock club right down the street, the Empty Bottle.
Oh yeah, sure.
And it was like a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. It was like we can't get it on at nighttime. How about you play in the afternoon? It was like 2 p.m, and this rock club is packed.
Wow, that's crazy.
And I was just like, at that point, I was just like, yeah, we've peaked here. There's no way. It's only downhill from here. 2 p.m, like, 150 people in this little club
listening to two drummers, man.
Yes. I mean, it was like amazing. At the same time, like amazing to see the like sort of, but like at a certain point, like, oh man, we're flying too close to the sun here. But on the other hand, like, and often I would say at that time 25 years ago or whatever, people would come by themselves.
Yeah.
And so they would play with locals and make some relationships. Now, I didn't meet anybody. Again, we were sort of like the scrub the B team as kids at that time, and we were definitely not involved in playing with them. But it was still exciting to like, of course, it was amazing to see those people, because we certainly weren't going to where they were working or playing. So when they came to us, it was amazing to see that.
Sure. Yeah.
To see, all the people, and there was especially a lot of musicians from Amsterdam, and they were definitely, maybe that was the sort of the entrance maybe for a lot of us was, also like Michael Moore is American,
Oh, yeah.
so
Yeah.
he, I think a lot of us, for some reason, that when like ICP would come, there was like so many of them that there was just like more, everybody had more bandwidth to like interact with somebody like me, like a whatever 27-year-old me or
Sure.
something. And so maybe that was a one time. I played, I remember with John Butcher
Oh, wow.
at a house concert. This was again 20 years ago or 15 years ago. And so I think it comes from those people coming to Chicago, and us just being like crazy fans. And sometimes that can be like oppressive, but I think we were crazy fans in the right way, or we could somehow it somehow fit. I don't know.
You mentioned all these players coming to Chicago. Like, when was the first time you went to Europe as a touring musician? You remember what? Or
I think it was probably 2007 or 2008, something like that. Again, a collective group with Jeb Bishop and Harris Eisenstadt.
Oh, okay.
We played a bunch of gigs in Poland, I remember.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, yeah, they have a huge scene. Yeah.
And that was the first time that I went. So that for me, it was so I moved here in 99, and so that's like 7 or 8 years before I like made the big time playing in someplace in Poland. So
someplace in big time playing someplace in Poland. That's enough.
But especially but here's the thing, is that those, I remember every time that I've played, it's just, you think about Poland, like I don't know, I guess I didn't really have any expectation of it, but the audiences were so, first of all, there was so many people would come to the gig, and so many young people, because and also it was just so exciting, and just like so much energy to everything, and it was a great way to like be introduced to that experience, for sure.
No, absolutely. I mean, I agree. It's just incredible scene in Poland. It's like the musicians and the clubs and so many great labels. I mean, it's a really a cool place for jazz, for improvised jazz. I'll put it like that.
Yeah.
But speaking of Europe, Jason, like, what are your plans for the upcoming months? I mean, do you have any tours planned up to come to Europe with this band, or like some projects, other projects, or like?
Well, I think that I'm for sure. I don't know if that type of thing about the future. I try to live one day at a time. If I can get through this day, that's great. But I know, Tomeka Reid, that quartet.
Yeah. Oh shit.
I wanted
to ask you that.
I have the test pressing of the record over there, and so that's coming out.
Beautiful.
Whenever the record is done, basically. I think. But it's everything is finished. You just have to wait for the pressing plant to get around to your project. And so once that comes out, I'm sure that that things will happen, or we'll be over there doing something.
How did you end up in that band with Tomeka? I mean, I love that group. Like, already the first one from what is 2015 or something? 2014? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I knew Tomeka from around town, and I feel like I played probably once or twice, actually the same instrumentation, but I don't think it was the same material. Like I think she has different songs, or I mean, it was really casual, just like play for this cake and you play for this event or something. I remember playing for something, maybe once or twice. And then I think that basically her and Mike Reid sort of dreamed up that exact combination of musicians, because I think that, you know, like Tomeka is definitely the person who is anxious about things, and so I think that in it, I think that she was like, I don't know, you know, who to get for this project and do a CD, and I know that Tomeka and Mike had worked with Mary and Toma in this other project of Mike's, Living by Lanterns.
Yeah.
And so I thought, and maybe as part of that something, maybe there was a mixed grouping improvised night with in that me and Toma had played together. Maybe. And then so maybe it was like, oh, okay, you guys sound good together. And I mean, at that time, Tomeka was living here too, so I guess it made sense to have two people from Chicago, two people from New York, as as that, you know, some sort of hook for, you know, conceptual framework for a band, right? But I mean, I think I'm not sure, she just called me to play. I don't remember any.
Well, it's a great band. I mean, I love it.
There's no story.
Sure. No, but beautiful. Yeah. Hopefully you'll come to Europe with that one. Would be nice.
Yeah.
To catch you. But with your group, you're not planning to come to Europe, right? I mean, it's hard.
No, I don't. I mean, if someone asks me to play, I'll play. But again, you know, I'm not the, you know, of course, it's very easy to just not do anything and not try, right? But, you know, especially from us in Chicago, there's, you know, it's definitely less demand for sort of our, you know, the I don't know, I mean, I don't know what it is. I'm more comfortable with the like artistic work rather than the kind of like trying to figure out this like commercial, like how do I sell this project to a festival or something, just because I have no clue. And especially, you know, the thing is, as a bass player, often you like whoever's promoting the concert. I've played hundreds of concerts in Europe at this point. I don't know any of the people who have organized it almost. You know, I'm like, I've never met them. I actually have met them and probably had dinner with them, but I'd like, you know, you don't, I mean, I guess I just don't think of it as like, you know what, I should make a point to exchange emails with you and all of that. Just, I mean, I don't know, but I guess I would rather, I remember hearing William Parker talk about something like this, and he was like, I don't recommend anyone do this. Don't do this. But I have never asked anyone for a gig. Not once. And because, I mean, I think it does put you in a kind of weird situation sometimes when you're asking, and especially if you're asking somebody where it's just like it doesn't match necessarily. Like if I'm asking to play at the, you know, symphony, whatever, like the top gig in Europe, it's like, who are you, right? Like, and I don't know, but I don't know where my level, I don't know anything about it. So, you know what, I'm just going to try to like be here and do the best that I can and make it just inevitable that people will ask me to do, you know, to be part of their thing, you know, just like I'm trying to be part of Roscoe Mitchell's thing and part of Ed Wilkerson's thing. If somebody wants to be part of my thing, then that's on me to make that happen, I think. And I hopefully, you know, I feel like I'm readily, you contacted me. I didn't, so I know people can get a hold of me if they want to.
Sure.
So so I think I'm just going to, I want to concentrate on making compelling work.
Yeah, these are nice finishing words actually. That's dot. Okay, that's it. No, but cool, man, Jason. Thanks for. I'll leave you a nice Saturday. What is it? Afternoon with you guys. So,
Yeah, thank
but
you.
thanks for sharing some of these thoughts. I really appreciate it. And
Thank you. Thanks for contacting me.
yeah, and I'll let you know when this is out. I'll send you a link and everything. So
Okay, great.
cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I have been sort of watching a bunch of them, and I was like, why did he contact me? He's like you're like talking to like all these stars and stuff like that.
Come
It's
on.
like, man, I guess if you want to like kill your YouTube channel
Yeah, okay.
views, like
But I love it, because I started going into one scene. Then I really, I listen to, beside being a player and everything, I listen to a lot of music, and then I started doing talks with the Chicago guys, and I was like, shit, I love this stuff, and it was like one through another, and like I want to talk now to everyone that you played with, like just because it's so nice to hear your views and how you compose and what you do and your connections. And I don't know, I love doing that. It's so much great music out there of you guys, like of everyone. It's like it's scary. It's really,
well, I'm glad that it reaches to people outside of our, because yeah, we can be a little bit, it's not, let's say in the US, in terms of isolation or like sort of prestige of the scene, like if New York's at a 10, Chicago is at like a 3 maybe,
really.
but then
Wow.
everywhere else is like a 1.
Yeah, okay,
It's
I've
like
heard that.
it's just like even like Los Angeles or like, I mean, it's nothing. I mean maybe LA is a little bit, I mean there's maybe some stuff happening since Jeff moved out there.
Yeah.
But I mean really in terms, if you just the sort of like just level of visibility and in interest in the sort of outside world, it's yeah, it definitely drops a lot from New York, as things are so much more centralized in terms of
Interesting.
everything there. So it's always, like you're talking about these French musicians, like, you live where? How could you possibly be a musician and live in the middle of nowhere? Like, how does it? I don't understand. Like, how do you survive?
Yeah. Who, me?
But it's such, I you learn about, like, it's so
Sure. Yeah.
less centralized
Yeah.
that it's, or in the US, people as, it's like it's like this place where they live, or at least are perceived to live, because there's plenty of people who actually don't live in New York.
Exactly. Yeah, sure. Exactly.
But where you're perceived to live as being like totally part of your value as an artist.
True.
And it's interesting. So
Yeah.
I've always thought of like pretending to live somewhere else. It's like you can just like, like, and just see how much, again, as like a conceptual art project, like how can I, like, what happens if I just go to New York, and I mean, I guess I already do, but like play a couple of times a year, and just start telling people you live in New York, because of course, even though among New Yorkers, it's like people are traveling, people are busy, and it's like, I haven't seen that person in 9 months or something, right?
Yeah. No, it's bizarre. It's like, funny. But no, like, I don't know. It's so much great music out there. Like, I make a list, of people that I really want to talk to, and it's just like it keeps expanding, instead of getting shorter. It's like, shit. Oh man, and this and this. Like, oh damn, when am I gonna do all this? But like, I love it, But I
but that's
appreciate everyone for taking their time always, and so
that's the advantage of this, that Zoom is, you can just do it.
Yeah, it's 1 hour of time and some nice chatting, and that's it. So it's everyone benefits, I guess. So I
Great.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, where are you?
I'm in Slovenia, otherwise Europe.
Okay.
Yeah.
In what city?
Maribor. I don't know if you played here.
I have, yes.
You played in Maribor? Really?
Yes.
Oh, with whom did you
Maribor.
play? You played in Ljubljana, I know that, and in Cerkno, I think.
Wait, do you know David Braun?
Oh yeah, he's one of my friends, for 25 years already. Oh yeah, you played in the basement there. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I somehow have a picture of the bass that I borrowed that night.
Okay.
It has a really weird shape to it. But I remember liking it. But yeah, for a while I was sort of collecting the photographs of all the borrowed basses.
Wow, that's a cool one. That would be a nice book,
Yeah.
actually.
Dr. Jazz.